All right. Welcome to my channel, and my pleasure to welcome Larry Johnson, the most knowledgeable person that I ever have come across. We're going to talk about a little bit about why is the Baltic Sea something that could be the scene of World War III. It borders to 9 nations, including Russia, being a body of water that's larger than the combined area of the Great Lakes, bordering Canada and the United States. So it's an important strategic water. And right now, NATO forces are exercising like crazy in this area. What do you say about that, Larry?
Yeah, most people not familiar with the geography, and I just pulled the map up to take a look at it, don't realize that, we call it a sea, but if that the narrow openings that are between Denmark and Sweden, if those got closed off, it'd be a big lake.
Yeah.
So it is, there are strategic choke points for the Russian Navy that are in the Baltic Sea. So if you're Russia, you don't want to be in a position where you would have to move ships out of that, out of the Baltic into the Atlantic. Very easy to monitor. Same for submarines. I really don't see how
you can't get through with a submarine without going in surface mode, because
Correct.
It's very shallow. The Great Belt between Denmark and Denmark, between Sweden and Denmark, is shallow. I'm a former diver in the Navy. I know it's not that deep. It's about 40 feet maximum.
Yeah, so this there's no stealth involved there.
Exactly.
And that, in the event of a war, you could contain the Russian Navy pretty easily.
Yeah.
Now, but it's a two-edged sword, because the NATO forces face the same challenge getting in. And it's the kind of thing that once they get in, can they get out? They could be trapped. So they are flexing muscle. And these exercises have been planned for, quite a while. They didn't just decide to do this of late.
No.
The whole process of conducting a military exercise, whether it's something in the air or on the land, in the sea, it requires a planning process. It usually starts, a minimum of 12 months, and usually it's more like 18 months out. So you go back and put yourself in the mind, what were the NATO planners thinking 18 months ago? That's what they're doing now.
Oh.
But in doing this, they're trying to both test their military capabilities, their ability to command and control, their ability to respond, and inevitably, like any good Hollywood movie, you got to have a villain. And in this case, Russia's always the villain.
Yeah.
So they're exercising to attack Russia. Now, they always claim, these are defensive exercises, and that's just nonsense.
Yeah.
So
in the 80s, it's rather interesting that the Baltic Sea borders 9 nations. I think I said that.
Right.
And it's like a large Lake Michigan, but there's no way in or out without being detected for naval forces, because we have the Strait of Öresund between Sweden and Denmark and so forth. The other thing is that during the Cold War, when I did my naval training, we encountered Russian naval forces all the time because they're so close. They have Kaliningrad, which is wedged between Lithuania and Poland. It's a big harbor, and it's an enclave. It's its own territory, but it belongs to Russia.
Right,
And then you
right.
have the Bay of Finland, which is rather large, and St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is about 10 million people. And it's got the head office of Gazprom, which is Europe's tallest building, which is, the oligarchs of Russia, and a big port. But they are dependent on getting through the other 9 nations to be able to ship goods back and forth.
Right. Yeah, well, that's one. That's one of the reasons Russia has been moving to develop this north-south transportation corridor with Iran. Now, granted, you're not going to sell any ship south in the Caspian Sea to the Arabian Sea. That's not going to happen.
No.
But if you're talking about moving cargo, moving goods, you can, you offload them down in the Arabian Sea. You put them on railroad cars. You take those north to the Caspian Sea and then put them on cargo, container ships that they can sell up into Russia. Or alternatively, they may be even looking to construct a north-south railroad line through Azerbaijan. But anyway, it's another alternative. However, from the standpoint of the Russian Navy, you're right. It's this is a big body of water compared to, say, the Great Lakes, but it's still it doesn't have ease of access, getting in, getting out.
Exactly. And it's not that deep either. I mean, the average depth is about 100 feet of the Baltics. It's got a maximum depth of about 400 meters in some areas, but it's quite shallow. And it's also, I sailed a lot in those waters in the Baltic since I'm from here. It could get pretty nasty. It is windy, and the weather is unpredictable, very much so, like the North Atlantic. But the North Atlantic, which I've sailed also in, is softer. When you get into a storm in the Baltic Sea, you get really nasty weather, real nasty waves, and so forth. And thereby, the shipping knows about this and are prepared. I mean, we have cruise ships that go on holiday cruises all over from Sweden to Finland, party boats, basically. But sometimes they sink because the weather is so nasty. Look at the Estonia, which was blown up. That's another story. It wasn't sunk by the weather; it was sunk by a sabotage. But nobody wants to admit that, and they're trying to cover it up as much as they can. As precisely what has been done with the explosions of the Nord Stream gas line.
Mm-hmm.
That was a sabotage. Everybody knows it.
Yeah. And it was, and that was a U.S. operation, even though they tried
together
to blame
with
it on
Norway, evidently.
Yeah.
Norway has the real capacity of those operations, of their experience of the North Sea oil fields. They have real good. And I know you've been in contact with Glenn Deason.
Yes.
I also have contact with him. He's from Norway. He can explain this for all of us. He knows it. And I hope to have a program with Glenn coming up shortly He's been with you and Judge
Yeah,
Napolitano and McGregor and all these heavy.
and the Duran boys. Yeah, he's a busy professor.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, when I spoke to him the last time, we speak English together. We could speak Swedish easily, but I would misunderstand him a little bit because he speaks Norwegian.
Oh,
So
okay.
we agreed to speak English to, you can hear I'm not proficient in English in any way, but I do understand it all. It's just like I understand Russian, but I couldn't speak a word back to a Russian person. Sweden and Norwegian is like Spanish and English, I guess, or
Or
related.
Spanish and Italian.
Yeah, that would be a good comparison.
Yeah, English is sort of uh, it doesn't play fair.
Yeah,
Within in Spanish, you've got let's say 27 letters in their alphabet, and each letter only has one sound.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it plays fair.
yeah,
Whereas in English, you got 26 letters in the alphabet, but you have 44 sounds.
exactly.
So
Y-
when
y-
people are learning to speak English, it doesn't always play fair.
No,
Same thing with Russia is a little similar to that in that you know when they write out a Russian word like Pokrovsk, well, it's spelled Prokovsk. Well, that would be Prokovsk.
yeah.
If you're going to pronounce it phonetically in terms of how the letter's written. But I've discovered that in Russia, when you see that O, it ends up having an A sound, which I
Uh,
always say, then why not write it with an A?
I have a Russian friend from Perm. Perm is a Siberian city, whatever. And all Europeans say Perm. And she says it's called Perm.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
spelled
Pierre.
Perm. So I'm going, why is it called Perm? Well,
Maybe that's
that's how we say it.
maybe that's where the word permafrost came from.
Yeah.
Permafrost.
Yeah. But it's all interesting shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Back to the Baltic Sea. Okay. Navy forces from Sweden, NATO, basically, though. Everybody is a member of NATO right now. They're running around like scald rabbits with one exercise of the other, and they're doing it together with the Air Force, with all kinds of things. They're flying around the Baltic Sea. They're cruising around the Baltic Sea like if we already was at war with Russia. We're not. We're
They're trying to,
supplying.
though.
We're trying to. We're supplying weapons. Sweden spent recently 16 billion Swedish kroners. That's about $1.6 billion in a support package to Zelensky. Zelensky, in his turn, went around and bought a big portion of a platinum mine in South Africa for a couple of $100 million. Don't the Swedes are totally stupid. Our healthcare is crumbling. It's bad. Our so-called welfare system in this country that we're famous for is crumbling. And still, Sweden's government send money to war that we
Yeah.
don't have anything to do with. What's your comment?
Yeah. Well, this drift to war um, is reminiscent to me of the lead up to World War One.
Yeah.
Because when you go back and look at it, there was no reason for countries to go to attack one another. It's not like one nation was threatening to take the territory and line all the people up and kill them or steal the resources. It was when Austria-Hungary did crack down on Serbia in the wake of the assassination of the Archduke.
Yeah.
Everybody else though that lined up said, "Well, that's our buddy." So it really turned out to be more like a bar fight. Well, that's what I see happening now. The West has constructed this narrative of Russia as an aggressor, Russia as an aspiring imperial power, and accordingly, we have to, quote, do everything in our power to stop Russia, instead of acknowledging that, over the last 30 years, the West has been the aggressor. These military exercises you're talking about,
Yeah.
they are taking place in and near areas of Russian interest and Russian control. And if you just simply flipped the script, and if Russia was conducting those kinds of exercises off the coast of Sweden, off the coast of Denmark, definitely off the coast of the Baltic states, the West would be outraged.
Yeah.
And, if Russia was doing that off the coast of the United States, again, we would be outraged, and correctly so.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems that the West is not going to apply any sort of simple standards. So when you go back and look, these military exercises have been a regular event in terms of part of the Western strategy to confront Russia since at least 2007, 2008.
Yep. Well, Sweden has a little bit of a, let's say, argument against naval operations in the Baltic. And that goes back to 1981. In 1981, a Russian submarine went aground and couldn't get out of there on a inlet to one of the Swedish naval bases in Karlskrona. And they got stuck, and it was popularly called Whiskey on the Rocks because the submarine was whiskey class, called by NATO. But it was an old Soviet submarine that had an excuse that they navigated wrong. They were going to be an exercise north of Poland, and they ended up 300 miles north and went aground in Sweden on secret Swedish area. I've been navigating there. It's a completely secret area called Gåsefjärden. It's not marked on regular sea charts. You have to have military charts to get through it, because it's full of stones, and it's a difficult place to navigate. And of course, the Russians were there, Soviet, I should say. So the Swedes has not forgotten about that. And this is 1981, many years ago.
Yeah, that's 44 years.
Yeah. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, you're better at math than I am.
Yeah,
Whatever. I was there, so as a UDT at the moment.
You were there as a teenager.
Yeah, I was there as a 19-year-old diver, and they sent us out to measure with the Geiger millimeter if it was radioactive, and it was. But they didn't have nuclear torpedoes. The reason that we got a reading for radioactivity was that the U-boat in case was from Kaliningrad. And in Kaliningrad, they had a lot of plutonium and other things on the docks. So it was, what do you call it? It's smittad. It was, yeah, it had some radioactive readings, but the torpedoes were not. So, and this was an old design, the Whiskey class U-boat.
yeah.
Yeah. They had about 2,500 of them, the Soviet Union.
Now, in that interim period from the collapse of the Soviet Union until, let's say, 2008,
Yeah.
Russia was not being aggressive in trying to, didn't present a military threat to NATO.
No.
By
Not at all.
any measure.
Yeah.
And yet NATO continued to treat Russia as if it were, the Soviet Union in the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
This entire trajectory that where we find ourselves today could have been avoided, should have been avoided, but instead, I think the West, it's a sort of a perverse version of Robert Palmer's song "Addicted to Love." They're addicted to war.
Yeah. I listen to people like Mark Rutte and other ones. He's the chief of NATO right now, and Cavoli, the 4-star. He's an idiot.
Yeah, he's. I was shocked. Let's call his testimony was at best schizophrenic, because he, in some elements, he clearly laid out that he tried to suggest that Russia's been degraded by the war, and yet everything he cited from he tried to say, oh yeah, Russia's lost an incredible amount of people, but they're recruiting folks at 30,000 a month, and their army has grown to 1.5 million.
Yeah.
Not
even mentioning as well that the collective European Union is not able to produce the munitions that is consumed by the Ukrainian proxy. The Russians, they're producing double what they need.
Well, in fact, Cavoli said with respect to artillery that Russia's producing 3 times the amount that the United States and Europe combined can produce. So, on that front, he touted up the Russian success. He tried to talk about their losses of tanks, vehicles, artillery,
right,
and yet had to admit that, Russia's replacing them as soon as they lose them. He said, they built 1,500 tanks last year, and the United States only built 50.
Yeah.
And really, the United States isn't building 50 brand new tanks from scratch. They're taking, it'd be like taking an old Volvo, and trying to put new paint on it, put a new engine in it, new tires. Say, this is our new Volvo. It was still built in 1979. Okay, so it ain't all that new.
My Volvo is built in 1984, but it's a good car.
Yeah, I had a Volvo. We had a Volvo years. Oh my goodness, 40 years ago. It was a good car.
Yeah, mine is an S80 model built in 20 years ago. And it's a tank, and it passes the MOT, the qualifications of everything. It's got 180 horsepower. It does about 200 miles an hour if I want to. So I love it. It's a good tank. It's a heavy car. It consumes a little bit of fuel, but it gets about, if I recount it to miles per gallon, I get about 30 miles per gallon. So that's not bad. That's under a liter per kilometer.
Yeah, just watch what's going to happen with these folks that have these electric cars. They're not gonna last as long as some of these old gas powered vehicles. Number
Yeah.
one, and number two, they don't. You're not going to find a great car lot. Used cars, whether it's a used Tesla or a used Chinese electric, whatever the electric vehicle is. Yeah, show me the great used car market for that. Not going to happen.
Another thing that we discussed on my channel here in Sweden called Lunchklubben. We do that every day, me and a colleague. And ferries. He lives on an island called Bornholm, which is outside of the Swedish coast in the Baltic. He moved there for reasons, to retire. It's a quiet place for him. But he also reacted to that they allow electric battery cars on board the ferry. And that's a closed environment. That's like a garage. And what are they going to do when one of those catches fire? Because you can't put the fire out.
Yeah.
Norwegian ferry liners and like Hurtigruten, which is like the north of Norway, they prohibited electric vehicles on board for safety reasons.
Yeah, they're going to get to practice their winter swimming techniques.
Yeah, we're good at that up here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why I live in Florida. I like the warm water, man.
Yeah, I'll come and visit you. Be sure, sometime, maybe this year. I gotta
love if you come in here. You gotta learn to love humidity.
Yeah, I know. I've been to Florida several times, so I'm familiar with it. But I like the warmth as well. But it could also rain quite heavily.
Yes.
It can be shit weather in Florida as well as it can be here in Scandinavia. It's a little bit different, though. Here it's dry.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thanks very much, Larry. We've been here for about half an hour, and that's for me perfect. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you again.
Hey, anytime, Håkan. Enjoy it. Right. Thank you, man. Take care.
Take care. Bye. We are be in contact. Bye.